Alright, so in this video I'm going to explain to you why MMA fails in self-defense. Um, as a disclaimer, I have no problem with MMA. I'm a fan myself. Um, I watch a lot. Well, I won't say I watch a lot regularly, but I watch a bunch of fights or whatever. Um, so it's not me hating on MMA. I think that there's a proper place for it. Um, I think that it's good as a combat sport, but as a form of self-defense, I totally and strongly advise against it for various reasons. Um, One is that MMA lacks dirty fighting, and this is a big issue because dirty fights can end an MMA fighter quick. I mean, look at all the foul tactics that were used in MMA fights. I mean, as of recently, like you see people getting hit in the groin, getting hit in the eyes, vulnerable areas. Um, I've heard cases where MMA fighters they got in dirty fights um, with other people, and the MMA fighters they started crying and whatnot, and and they complained it's not fair, it's against the rules, and blah blah blah. I had another guy talk about how he met up with this MMA fighter who bragged about if somebody bit him in the leg, he would break his arm and whatnot. So they said, okay, let's do it. Um, and then he bit him in the leg. It wasn't full force. Keep in mind. And the MMA fighter just jolted and let go, and then the guy got free out of the arm bar. So, um, all the MMA fighters, they can claim that they can somehow resist, dirty fight tactics, but actions speak louder than words. So, it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to do it. And the critics say that MMA fighters can do it too, but the problem with that is they don't train to do it. You'll never see them, hardly ever see them train in MMA gyms to fight dirty because it's against the rules. I mean, um, if you train to fight dirty, who do you think is going to do it better? The person who actually trains to do it, or the person who just says he can do it but doesn't train for it? Is that type of thing. Um, it's not to say that MMA fighters can never do it. It's just that at the right time and place, they're not going to be able to do it because they haven't properly conditioned their minds and bodies. And more importantly, you have to be able to willingly do it. Um, you can't just say that you can do it, but not back it up because um, there's all these types. There's psychological barriers that could prevent you from gouging someone's eyes out. Um, so that's the important thing is, are you willing to take someone's eyes out? And it's not an easy question to answer because unless you're in that position, you really don't know what you do. Um, so I think that the critics' arguments don't really work for that reason. And, you got both sides on the fence saying, um, going back and forth about it. But um, You just, I mean, measure the effectiveness of the dirty fight tactics in the MMA ring. Like, you'll have some people who say, they'll point out a fighter and then they'll say, well, this fighter, such and such fighter resisted an eye gouge. But when you actually look at the specific case, it wasn't really an effective eye gouge. It was just more like an eye poke, which isn't, it's very different from an eye gouge. An eye gouge is when you intentionally stick your fingers all the way in the person's eyes and you take their eyes out. And they could get blind briefly or permanently, depending on the damage. I mean, sometimes you can even physically take out the eyes with an eye gouge. Um, so yeah, um, it just looks good in the MMA ring because the rules make it that way. The rules make it to where you know to where it prolongs the fight and nobody gets hit in the groin, nobody gets their eyes taken out or whatnot, all those things. But the problem is that people are assuming um, that the MMA fighter is invincible when he's not, or she, um, because at the end of the day, the eyes, the ears, the throat, the groin, the solar plexus, the kidneys, all your vital organs, they're all um, weak spots at the end of the day. There will always be weak spots. And unless we become cyborgs or something, it's not going to change. Um, for most people, they get hit in the groin, they're going down. Doesn't matter, um, unless they're on drugs or something, they can probably resist it, or if the hit wasn't done hard enough. But in most cases, um, people go down when they get hit in the groin or the eyes or in vulnerable spots. Um, it's just the reality. So, um, that's pretty much my first point with it. My second point is how how the rules restrict the effectiveness of MMA and actually not MMA, the effectiveness of combat in general. Um, the rules restrict what you can do in a self defense situation. Um, and that's my problem with it is a is the rules mindset, is a sports mindset. It's not, that's not a self defense because it's not really going to help you deal with the threat. It's not going to help you diffuse a situation. It's not going to help you um, develop the necessary skills you need in a self defense situation. There's no weapons. There's no multiple attackers. There's no realistic scenarios that you'll encounter on the street. Um, it's just two guys duking it out until somebody wins by knockout or submission. That's not self defense. That's sports. There's a difference between sports fighting and defending yourself from attack. A sports fight is when two people agree to meet up and then they duke it out and show who's the best fighter. In a real attack, you're not going to know who you're dealing with. You could be dealing with somebody who's a soldier, an armed robber, a murderer. You don't know, and it's never, hardly ever, a fair fight. Um, it's not a fight at all because the person is going to attack you without your consent. So that's my biggest problem when people they point out, oh well, you know, I've been in such and such fights, and it's like, okay, that's great, but that's not self defense. You're not defending yourself. You're being compliant and agreeing to mutual combat. If you want to do that, that's fine, but you can't claim that you know how to defend yourself if that's what you view self defense as. It's not self defense. Um, Another problem I have with it is how MMA lacks weapons. What I mean by that, I mean that there's no effective way to deal with armed attackers. It's just ignored, or it's downplayed, or there's some techniques, but it's unrealistic, much like traditional martial arts. And um, that's problematic because weapons can completely render what you do useless. Doesn't matter how great of a fighter you are. Um, if somebody pulls out a gun or a knife, um, you're pretty much done for. And that's what MMA fighters don't get, is that, you know, it doesn't even matter if the guy's trained or not. If he's trained, then you're in deeper trouble than you are already in, or could be. If the guy is, I mean, it doesn't take much skill for somebody to use a knife. Um, and that's what's so dangerous about knife attacks, is that people repeatedly stab and slash and do all this crazy stuff that you're not going to have enough time to respond effectively, if you can even respond at all. Um, and that's one of the things that can pretty much get you killed or beaten in a street attack. You know, look at my channel and you look at the videos that I posted. You know, you see a bunch of MMA fighters who died as a result of street attacks with weapons. Um, you know, I got a whole bunch of compiled a list of a bunch of martial artists, be it boxers, Muay Thai fighters, you name it. All of them were killed or severely hospitalized in a real life um, armed attack. So um, that's my issue with it. And for the people who say that, and oh well, MMA fighters, they can do it too. You know, they got weapons too. It's like, okay, but then now it's no longer MMA. Now what you're doing is using weapons. Um, and same thing with what the first point I made. It's, if you don't train with weapons, then how do you know that you're going to use it effectively in a real life situation? If you you know, it's not enough to just buy a gun from a store or a knife and then be confident that you can use it in a real life situation, because there's so many factors like stress, um, adrenaline, you know, accuracy. It's not just point and shoot. Um, a lot of times when people shoot, even professionals, when they shoot, they usually miss because it takes a lot of skill to be a deadly accurate shooter. So, um, and another thing is, what if you successfully land a shot, but the guy doesn't go down, then what are you gonna do? You know, people ask me if I could beat Conor McGregor, and you know, I'll be like, sure. I mean, just I mean, all I have to do is just shoot him or get somebody else to shoot him. I mean, it's that easy, you know. Um, and his MMA skills would be useless because um, you know, weapons pretty much render your hand-to-hand combat skills useless. And I mean, you don't have to be a pro shooter in a way, um, but but I mean, same thing with a knife. Um, somebody who fires multiple shots is at you, depending on the range, probably going to hit you. And being a pro shooter is certainly better than being an amateur. Um, so yeah, that's the thing about it. Um, Another problem I have with it is just the lack of um, training against multiple attackers. Multiple attackers is serious business. If if a group of people came up on you and started attacking you, then you're unless you know how to deal with the situation, you're not going to be able to do it. And I've heard of cases of MMA fighters getting jumped. I heard of one story of this guy, this MMA fighter who tried to take someone down in a street fight. He got his arm broken and couldn't couldn't continue the fight until finally he got ambushed by two guys and they beat him up badly. So, um, so yeah, it's in MMA you don't have to deal with that problem because it's usually just you against one person. I mean, maybe in the future it'll change. Who knows? But as of right now, I just don't see it being an effective self-defense system for that reason and for the reasons I listed previously. So to sum it up, I got no problem with MMA. The only problem is how people they try to justify it as an effective self-defense system when it's not. You know, um, just because it's better than traditional martial arts in terms of striking, grappling, kicking, ground fighting, all that does not make it ideal for self-defense. You're making an unfair comparison um, because martial arts is not really self-defense to begin with. You got to focus on the reality on the streets. You have to focus on violent crimes as they are. You know, one thing being better than another does not make that one thing best at something that's completely different. Is a completely different mindset. So, I got no problem with the people who stay in their lane and they practice MMA for sport. Um, you know, that's where it belongs. It belongs in the ring. Um, the problem I have with MMA is how people they try to claim that it's some kind of self defense system when it's not. If you want a self defense system, then take a realistic self defense course and just leave MMA, you know, at home somewhere. Like if you know, only time I watch MMA is on the UFC or something like that. Other than that, I think that more people need to educate themselves on the reality of violence because if not, then this whole MMA mindset is gonna get people hurt or killed in a real life attack. Um, so that's all I got to say on the subject. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Um, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you later.